If you're trying to make any kind of meaningful, effective change in your life, you've come to the right place. Good day, ladies and gents. Welcome back to We're Talking Shift. It is good to be back. You may have noticed that, well, it's been a while since an episode has come out. That's because I rather spontaneously decided to take a short break, which evolved into a longer one. Well, to say it was quite wonderful, I just didn't want to stop. That would be an understatement. But hey, sometimes you just got to do your thing, right? So, to kick off the upcoming Mental Health Awareness Month, we will be talking about this ever important subject because, well, things like anxiety, depression, all the way down the emotional scale to complete despair and suicide has been steadily rising over the past decade and is now more than ever affecting younger and younger people. In fact, I was reading a statistic the other day from 2020 that said suicide is the third leading cause of death for young people and the second leading cause for youths aged 10 to 14, which is, I mean, extremely alarming. So, we're going to dive into making a mental health shift with my guest today, Sam Eaton. Sam is an author, a speaker, and the founder of Recklessly Alive, a suicide prevention organization sprinting towards a world with zero deaths by suicide. It's a fantastic mission. Sam has spoken at over 100 events throughout the US, sharing his story of battling depression and suicidal thoughts. Sam's first book, Recklessly Alive, What My Suicide Attempt Taught Me About God and Living Life to the Fullest, reached the top 200 best-selling books on Amazon when it was released in January 2021. I read it from cover to cover and it is very excellent. I highly recommend it. Due to his inspiring, empowering messages and his encouragement, Sam's Instagram and TikTok have blown up. So look for him there under the handle at Recklessly Alive. He currently resides in my hometown of Minneapolis, Minnesota, where he enjoys collecting vinyl records. I remember those, lifting, well, moderately heavy weights and trying every flavor of Oreos. Well, Sam, welcome to We're Talking Shift.
Thanks so much for having me, Loree.
I'm so glad you're here. I loved the book and I really, I dig the cover too. It really makes me want to get out and enjoy the lake, which I miss.
Absolutely. That's the Boundary Waters up north near Canada, one of my favorite places on the planet. So it was just perfect that ended up being the cover we chose.
Yeah, it's nice. It's peaceful. It conveys a message that, you can enjoy life, even just something as simple as paddling your boat across the water. Uh, Sometimes we overcomplicate things, right? And it it can be it can be very peaceful to just be with nature, and it seems like a good reset for people.
Absolutely. And when you've been through a lot of struggles, one of the good things that can come out of that is you start to appreciate some of those beautiful moments a little bit more.
Yeah. So, why did you write the book? And why call it Recklessly Alive?
So, gosh, 8, 9 years ago now, I actually was in Africa. I spent 6 weeks playing on a worship team, traveling through Africa. That was 18 months after my attempt. So I went from not wanting to be alive. 18 months later, I'm spending my summer on the plains of Africa. While I'm there, staring up at the African stars, and I had this dream to write a book. I love writing. I'd been writing a blog at that point. And so I got home, I sat on my deck, I opened a blank Word document because I have no idea how do you write a book. And I thought it was going to be this kind of like my blog, these short, funny stories of my life. And, I wanted to be a comedian, and that was kind of the tone of the book. And instead, immediately that first day, I spent 3 hours, and it was the story of my suicide attempt that came out, including the phrase recklessly alive. And the chapter that I started writing very at the beginning, it's still in the book today, which I love. It's actually the skydiving chapter. Now it happens in the second half of the book.
Mm-hmm.
But I immediately jumped on Google. I was like looking, had anyone ever used that phrase before? And it kind of all just came together. It perfectly described what I felt about not wanting to be alive. And then the steps after of, okay, I don't want to die, but I also want to chase a life that I want to live.
I like that. So, just for a little bit of background, what was your youth like, your childhood? Because I think that, it's easy for people that don't haven't had any life experience with what the challenges like what you went through or other people. It's easy to make assumptions like, oh, they must have, been through lots of trauma and, and just never got healed. And it just kind of snowballed from there. Was that the case with you, or was it something more subtle?
It's kind of a combination of those things. I went through some very challenging things as a kid. Plenty of people have been through more horrific things. But yeah, my childhood had plenty of challenges. My dad was an alcoholic. As a result of that disease, he just caused a lot of pain in all of our lives. When I would come home from school, I never really knew if it was going to be like a happy, jokey kind of a drunk day or like a chair throwing kind of a day. And so my home life was pretty tumultuous overall. I was the peacekeeper of the family. I was like constantly trying to read the room. Okay, if I just do the dishes, then this won't explode and this won't happen. And I held it together. I mean, even through middle school, I had straight A's. I was on the basketball team. My dad left when I was 12. He took off. I actually haven't seen him since. I don't have a relationship with him. And things, for the first time, I remember walking in after school and it was quiet and peaceful. And it was just this, for the first time in my life, I can remember just feeling this deep exhale. I can still picture it. But as I got into high school, for the first time in my life, I started struggling. Age 14, 15, I quit the sports I've been playing. I really started isolating myself. I hid in video games and that sort of thing. I struggled in school for the first time. I'd always been one of the smart kids, and suddenly I had C's and D's, and I couldn't focus. I couldn't concentrate. And I felt stupid. I used to write on my papers over and over again, I hate my life. I hate my life. Nobody really noticed. I didn't seek help. But I mean, ultimately, I didn't know that what I was experiencing has a name. It's called depression. It's quite common. 1 in 6 people will experience depression at some point in their life in the United States. But nobody ever told me. So I just thought I was broken, that I was messed up, that it was a me issue. And no, it's like there's a medical reason that you're feeling this way, and it's not your fault.
So what do you think, if happened? Like you said your dad left and you came home and you felt this sense of peace and you could breathe and everything just seemed calm, and all of that fear probably had left with him. But then all of a sudden this depression rears up a couple of years later. You were doing well, and then it just seems like kind of out of nowhere. Do you think it's because of all of that sort of trauma that was still there, that hadn't really been dealt with, and then it just was sort of rising to the surface and manifesting like that?
So the average age of onset of depression typically is age 14 or 15. Of course, it can happen much earlier. As you mentioned, I mean, the suicide rate is ages 10 to 24 is the second leading cause of death. I mean, 10 years old, those are our babies, right? It's like fifth grade. But we don't know for sure why depression comes at certain points. We have ideas. We know some ideas on what causes it, but we don't know for sure. And the part that drives me to do what I do is the average time from onset of symptoms to treatment is 10 years. The average person starts experiencing mental illness. They don't get help for 10, and that's just the average. And that was my story. I did not get any help or receive any help until well into my 20s when after I attempted.
Yeah. And so then you got to hope that in that 10-year gap, some never make it long enough. They actually just can't make it until they find that help. So you lose a lot of people along the way, along the journey to help. I imagine it's rough. It was interesting when you talked about the voice teacher, because, I think that so many times, adults and a lot of times teachers, people that are in, an influential position in a young person's life, just are clueless about the influence, even just, what may seem like a casual phrase or something that's not, that doesn't seem maybe important to them, but how it can completely, wreck your mental stability. And so talk about that for a second. I mean, I was appalled when I read that he said, I don't want got it here. I don't want my name on your recital program. I think it's best if you find another teacher. And tell me about that.
So I chose to be a music major. After high school, I loved choir. I loved singing. I wanted to be a teacher even from an early age. And I picked choir. I was like, this is what makes my heart sing the most thing in the world. And I'm going to go for it. And so I went to Luther College. It's in Northeast Iowa. They have more music majors than any place in the country. It's this huge, huge music school. And I got there and I got set up with this voice teacher who was supposed to be great and you don't really have a say. And it just kind of ran like, well, this is what it's like to be in college now. Like you just need to suck it up and you get yelled at. And he would ask me, are you stupid, when I would screw up? And my anxiety was off the charts. I mean, I was practicing hours and hours every day and he still would just explode. And it was horrible. It was horrible. And what I didn't realize while it was happening is how much his opinion was being attached to my self-worth. And his voice started to become the voice in my head, not just about music, but about everything else. I had put all of my time and energy, my hopes and dreams into this one thing. And he would just constantly beat me up over it because I didn't fit his view. I didn't want to be an opera singer. I just wanted to teach kids. Like that's what I wanted. And that didn't fit his life and what he wanted. And whatever his unresolved trauma was, he was horrible to me. And that being said, to anyone listening to this, it's like, I hope you can find the strength to stand up, because I did a little bit, but I never pushed back. I never fought. I just accepted truly verbal abuse that I experienced in his room, and had such a detrimental effect on my mental health as a young adult.
Yeah. And that's so important for people to understand, not only people in those positions that are in influential positions that we're spending, years, sometimes years of our life with, like in school, but for the students to realize that those people don't necessarily know what they're talking about just because they happen to be a teacher or an instructor. Maybe they're really good at teaching about the topic that they've learned about, but that doesn't mean that they have a perfect life, that they know what is best for you. It doesn't mean that their words have any value to you. So it's really students, young people, understanding that you don't have to agree with them.
100%. And I think our world is starting to finally have this conversation that, it's not worth it if it destroys your mental health. I think of Simone Biles in this last Olympics, and she just said, for my mental health, I'm not competing. And people lost their minds and they're screaming at her for being un-American. And then there's this other group that's like, well, good for you. But ultimately, whatever you're going through in life, if it is destroying your mental health, like me taking voice lessons with someone like that, it's not worth it. Find another teacher, find another coach, find another job, get yourself out of that situation, because you're not going to be happy in something like that.
Yeah. So I'm curious, did you ever send that teacher a copy of your book?
Oh, I thought about it so hard, but I did our alumni newsletter featured me in my book, and so I'm like, well, maybe he saw it.
I mean, maybe. I don't know, Sam. I'm kind of feeling like you ought to just pop a copy in his mailbox. But I mean, why not? Maybe it would help him deal with his unresolved trauma. So, might be doing him a favor. All right. So moving on. In college, then you made it to college, but then you said you never drank, and then you started drinking in college. You had promised yourself you wouldn't, but it happened. And then I thought it was interesting. You said at one point you had, and it's not unusual, kids go to college and kids drink. I mean, it's pretty much the norm for most. But at one point you had a realization, you said, with you and others you had been partying with one night, and you said, I realized that everybody was, quote, desperate. And I thought that was an interesting observation that you made, and that, a realization that came to you. So what made you look around and go, everyone here is desperate? Why desperate, and desperate for what?
Yeah, so alcohol had been such a horrible thing in my life growing up. I was never going to touch it, didn't touch it my whole freshman year. But it just kind of was, if you want to have friends, if you didn't go out and you didn't do that, you were weird and you sat at the dorms by yourself. And so, and it was fun. And like all of us want to be included. Like
Yeah.
we have this herd mentality where we want
Mhm.
a crew of people who are with us. And as I got out of college, I started using that to cope. It changed completely from just like something fun that I did to I'm doing this to forget and to escape. And that's where it got really dangerous. And so the chapter you're talking about, I'm out at a bar and I'm intoxicated, but somebody like raises a shot glass and says to forgetting who we are. It was such this light switch moment for me as I'm driving home the next day, and I'm like, we're desperate to feel alive. Like that's what you're trying to create these stories of like, because you wake up the next day and you're like, oh, I can't believe you did that, and can you believe you talked to that girl, and you're looking for courage to do all these things that you want to feel alive, but it's a bait and switch, because you're actually getting the opposite. You're getting the hangover, you're getting the negative effects to your mental health. And once I could identify, oh, I'm trying to feel alive, but this is just the wrong avenue. Alcohol, it changed how my relationship with alcohol, and I've had a good relationship with alcohol since. But it truly was a light switch of, if you're trying to forget who you are, there's much bigger problems than just a couple of
Yeah.
drinks.
Yeah, that's so interesting, that you just had that awareness. It was almost like you were getting a message to think deeper about your life. And it is kind of sad when you think about it. There's probably a lot of people that feel like, yeah, let me just forget who I am, why I'm here, what I'm doing, my whole situation. And that's, yeah, that's a sad place to be. Um, Skydiving, you touched on it when we opened, and I thought that that was really interesting. First of all, in Minnesota in January, I just got to say, thinking that's a little crazy. I mean, the skydiving, and I've done that. I took my whole family skydiving in Arizona. But when you said, I think it's actually crazier that you decided to do it in January. So what was that all about?
So I attempted at 23. So after college, I moved back home where this trauma had happened. A really important relationship from college had ended. My life really bottomed out, to the point where I picked a day, I made a plan. Thankfully, in the most courageous moment of my whole life, I chose to stay. But I woke up the next day and it wasn't like perfectly healed. It still isn't that way. I still have had struggles. That was 10 years ago. But following that attempt, I came up with this idea, and you can say it's from God or the universe or whatever, but it was this idea: I'm going to do one thing every single day that makes my life better or makes the world a better place. And I'm going to take a picture of it. And that was my pledge to myself. And it forced me to take action. I had been hiding. Truly, when I was thinking about taking my life, the question was, have you really given life everything you've got? Because if you have, it's okay. You can give up, but I'm not sure that you have. I'm not sure you've tried everything you can to heal, to have the life that you want, to pay off the debt that you have, to have the career that you want. I truly had been hiding from my life and not taking these risks. And so I made this pledge, and some of the things were just like a coffee with a friend, or like trying yoga for the first time, or like just going to volunteer. These things that were forcing me to live, to actually get out of my house, to fight this depression and live. And one of those things was skydiving, because we had always talked about it. We'd always joked about it. So we bought a Groupon. And let me just say, skydiving is something that you should willingly pay full price for. That's not an activity that I recommend looking for a deal on, because if they're offering like 60% off, it's not a great idea.
Yeah, I would question that. I'd be concerned.
So my friend Dan, I roped him into it. We drove like an hour south of Minneapolis to this cornfield. We got
Oh
to this
God.
building. It was so sketchy. They put these like leather helmets on us that I was like, it's not helping. And they showed us a VHS tape from the 80s, and then we were in an airplane. Like, well, here we go.
Oh my God. Well, you lived to tell about it, so
I did. Well,
I'm
like,
glad.
seriously, those moments, I mean, you skydive, it doesn't have to be skydiving, but those moments remind, like, they give you this breath of life and this exciting feeling and that thing I was looking for in alcohol. Even just there's another chapter where I do the polar plunge, which is you cut a hole in the ice in the winter up here and you jump in, and like there's silly things, but like
Yeah.
it's these reminders to not sit on the sidelines of our lives and live them and make these
Right.
funny stories and these funny memories.
Yeah, they do. They make for great stories. And it does do something to you. It does feed your ability to be courageous. And so when it comes time to do something that's maybe not just more of a frivolous and fun thing, but something where you need to muster some courage and have some mettle, it's helped you develop that muscle to be able to do that when there's something that's, serious in your life. So doing those things is like training for the tough stuff, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I surprised my husband on his birthday. The kids and I surprised him and took him skydiving, and he didn't know where we were going. We just got up really, it was really early, and I'm like, it's a surprise. And he said on the way there, because we're like an hour away from where we were in Phoenix, and he said, I thought maybe we were going on the hot air balloon thing. And then when he saw the sign as we turned down the last road, the big billboard that said Skydiving Arizona or whatever it was, and he goes, I was like, oh, okay, we're doing this now. And I said, well, you said you always wanted to do it. He goes, yeah, but today? It just was, he didn't have any time to mentally prepare. So, yeah, we got, I think, much more current information and a video, and and I watched my whole family bail off the plane, fall out of the sky, in front of me. I was the last one, and I questioned myself for a minute, but I thought, well, we probably take more chances just driving to the store every day than we do parachuting. So it was a good experience. But I think it was that same chapter, somewhere around there, you said, I think God, like any great parent, wants all of his kids to fall in love with being alive, to live a purpose, to love deeply, and to help others however we can. And I really loved that. And, so many people don't know what their purpose is. They're chasing it. They're looking for it. They don't know how to find it. I imagine you get people that ask you that. How do you know what that is? How do you find it? What do you say to them?
I think all of us have a lot of different purposes, and a lot of us have different purposes throughout our lives. If you're a parent, one of your purposes is to be a good parent or a good son or, a good brother. Finding your purpose for me, I didn't want to. That's truthfully, I wasn't trying to. I sat down to write this book, and this story of the suicide attempt came out that I had never told anyone. But even then, I kind of shoved it back down, and I worked on the book a little bit behind the scenes. And then I've been a teacher the last 12 years, a school teacher. I did become a music teacher. And in a district where I taught, we lost 3 students, a teacher, and a principal in about 18 months. And I watched my community, who all took their own life. And I watched my community have no idea what to do or say. I watched publicly, not much changed. And each one was just a pounding urge. There's something in my chest that I had to do something to help. And I think we all have that. In fact, I fully believe that we all have that. There are things in our world that we see that aren't right, that we can be a part of fixing. And it doesn't mean you have to start a nonprofit yourself. There are plenty of ways that we can get involved. But if you're looking for your purpose, the first questions are, A, what have I been through that I could help somebody else have an easier time, right? Like how can I reach back into my story and be the person that Sam needed when he was 16, when he was 22? That's a really great way to find your purpose. The other one is to just look around the world. Maybe it's sex trafficking. I recently heard there are more people in slavery right now than any time in history. And all of that information's out there. So if you're feeling like you don't have a purpose, like we all have things that we can do and that matter and that give back to the world. And especially if you're struggling with mental health, one of the best things you can do is volunteer, is to get out there and go for it. But you kind of got to look for it. You kind of got to go after that to find that purpose.
Yeah.
I don't know they will always come find you.
Well, exactly. And I think you're right. It's like, it's almost like going, to a buffet, and you just sort of want to try a whole bunch of different things until you find, what you really like. And it could be something as simple as, like you did, starting out with just trying something different or new each day. And it could be really, really simple, but just being proactive about taking an action of some sort. And you may not find your one big calling right away, and that's okay. But I think you're right, though. One of the best ways to feel valuable and to feel to build up your sense of self-worth is to actually shift your focus away from your own dilemmas and your own, the things that you're wallowing in, and try in any way, shape, or form to be of service to somebody else. When you shift your focus over, but what can I do to help this person, even in the smallest way, um, as you talked about, is actually like some of the best medicine.
100%. And I kind of share about that in the book a little bit. I have this journey of like, I'm trying to feel more alive. So I'm doing yoga and I'm jumping out of airplanes, and all that's good and fine. And eventually what I find is some of the happiest and most alive moments of my life are helping other people. It's on a trip to Haiti where I'm serving these orphans who have no one. And there's a
Mm.
chapter in the book where I have lunch with a homeless guy. And it is one of the most
Yeah.
meaningful moments of my whole life. So if you're feeling like maybe you don't feel alive lately, like maybe you're just looking in the wrong places.
Yeah, I love that story that you shared. Was it Bill? Was that his name? Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you ever maintain contact with him, or did you see him more after that? It was just kind of a
I
brief.
Yeah, we did for a little bit and then we lost touch. I think about him often. I still, when I'm driving downtown, I kind of keep my eyes out for him. But the people
Yeah.
around us can have such a huge impact on us. I mean, he impacted me just as much as I did him.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a really, really cool story. Um, you attribute part of your change and ability to uh, pull the nose up, so to speak, on your life to the realization that almost everyone that you were listening to at some point had no idea how to live,
Mhm.
which I thought was very interesting. So, what did that realization mean to you, and what did it inspire you to do?
So I've had a complicated relationship with the church and with Christianity, as so many people have. I've experienced some pretty big hurt, but when I following my attempt, I went back to the church. I had been in the church as a kid and kind of found community there, and found some support at a time that I really needed it. Um, but through that experience, I started to realize that the people around me that I was trying to be like wasn't the life that I wanted to live, right? Like the partying people, they I had to live by their rules, but that didn't make me feel alive. That wasn't the
Mhm.
life that I wanted to live. So who
Mhm.
could I look to? Who had the life that I actually wanted to live? And for me at that time, it was Jesus. It was
Mhm.
this faith. It was this God moment where here's a guy who spent his whole life just loving and living for other people. And when I lived that way, it helped me. It might not help other people, but it did. It helped me to focus on something, to find some truth and some beauty in my life. Uh,
Mhm.
and and it was a changing moment for me. And like I said before, it's also came with its challenges and
Sure.
as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Well, our life journey is kind of like a never-ending process, right? You never actually get to. There's very few people, I should say, that complete all there is to learn about being a human in one lifetime. So, if you're trying to evolve to become the best version of yourself, to become the best human you can be, it's a lifelong journey. It never ends. And I think when you said, you were trying to, you decided to start being a little more like Jesus. I mean, that's a pretty great teacher, pretty great mentor, right? To follow. Um, I really like that. And so, in your experience, does it seem like fewer people have a relationship with God, or higher power, whatever they want to call it, of some sort, um, or does it, and maybe fewer people have been veering away from any kind of spiritual relationship or trying to develop one. Do you think that not having that kind of foundation to lean into could play a role in rising depression rates? What's your experience?
So when I teach about depression, I really am teaching there are three unique battles that you're fighting. You're fighting a physical battle, what's happening in your actual body,
Yeah.
chemicals in your brain, and how you're treating your body, exercise, sleep, nutrition. So many of these things contribute to our mental health. There's a
Mhm.
mental side of depression, trauma we've been through, as you mentioned before, our self-talk, how we talk to ourselves. Um, Therapy, I mentioned, is part of that. Our boundaries, how we let people treat us, our relationships, a ton of that is very mental. And I fully believe there is a spiritual side that doesn't have to be religion, but it's these
Mhm.
questions like, why am I here? This purpose discussion that we're having. When do I feel connected to something outside of myself? And even through my faith journey, I've always felt more connected to God in nature, outside, not
Mhm.
inside a church building, sitting in a meeting,
Yeah.
reading a book, but out living an adventure, out under the stars, out serving people in the world. That is my
Yeah.
connection to God and to faith. But I think people are interested. I don't think people are not interested in asking those big questions. Where did we come from? Is there a God? Is love, like love? A lot of people say love is becoming the religion. And I think that actually is still God speaking through them. I
Mhm.
think people are burnt out on religion and the politics of it all. And some
Yeah.
of the things I've experienced, I had a pastor tell me, you're a source of darkness. That it's one of the hardest days of my life, even through everything I've been through. So
Mm.
the trauma of religion is a part of this story, but I believe that spirituality is a part of mental health. And if it's something people listening haven't explored, maybe it's just an opening to ask yourself some of those questions and to read about some things outside of that.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. Just be open, consider things, be willing to think about those things on a deeper level. It's
one of
important.
my one of my favorite reviews of my book comes from an atheist, and she said everyone should read this book. It's not preachy, it's not, and because it is a book where I'm asking some of those questions even of myself.
Right, right. Yep. So what did you mean when you said I don't have the first part of the quote, but it ends with well-intended people trying to make a reckless God palatable for the comfort-seeking masses. What do you mean by that?
um, my experiences with church, so following the attempt, I threw myself into this pretty big church outside of Minneapolis. I was there 5-6 days a week. Sometimes I did everything. I was a Sunday school teacher, I was part of the youth group, I played on the worship team, I went to group book study things, I did things on the weekends. I lived and breathed this church. And but every 6 months or so, I would burn out, and I would come to this place and just ask myself, what are we doing here? What do we do? What are we doing? Who are we actually helping? Who I mean, I keep reading this Bible book, and like the book of James is talking about how if you love God, you take action and you help the poor and you clothe them and you feed them. And I looked at this church with $1 million budget and fancy lights, and I kept just I something about it never sat with me. It just never felt right. And through my own questioning, I just felt like
Mm.
you have this big God who's done these incredible things. Jesus lost his life trying to help people, and we're sitting inside movie theater seats with fancy lights, and talking about, God's cool and God loves people. And I just felt like God, for me, as I said before, was out in the world doing the actual actions, helping the people around, and not just sitting inside of a fancy building. And that's my journey. And church has helped people. And I'm not here to bash church in any means. I think church is a good thing in our world ultimately. But for me, I think we kind of lost some of the grandeur and some of the message, and watered it down to what felt comfortable, and grab your Starbucks and watch this little video and see you next Sunday.
Right. Yeah, yeah. It seems like if you're not applying all of the messages and the teachings out in the world to your life and demonstrating out in the world, It's sort of, what's the point? I mean, unless it's just to check that box, did that, on to the next thing. Yeah. So I like, I've looked through and there's, you have a lot of great posts on Instagram. Um, and I think a lot of people um, don't know what to do with people in their life that they think are, I don't like to use this word toxic. I think it can be a mistake to refer to people as toxic. Because sometimes those people that you consider toxic or the worst people, in your life are the ones that are challenging you to become the better person that you can be. So if you know what I mean? So there's a fine line there, but one of your posts was 5 tips for dealing with the worst people in your life. Do you remember what they were? Do you want to talk about some of those? Because we do have a lot of people that maybe we can't get away from, that maybe they're family members or coworkers or something. And you just, you got to deal with it. And if you're already a little bit on the edge, having some anxiety and depression, what do you tell those people to do?
It it is a tongue-in-cheek video. I mean, step 4 is to Google tacos near me and go find tacos. But
Yeah.
ultimately, and I completely agree. I don't think we should just cut off anybody we disagree with. I don't think that's the answer. But I think social media has changed some things for us, where we try to stay connected with every person we have ever met. Right? It's like you've got 2,000 people on Facebook that you haven't talked to in 20 years. And I don't think our brains are designed that way. I don't think we're meant to see every time anyone gets engaged that we've ever met. And so,
Mhm.
I mean, truthfully, the overarching message is it's okay to let people go and to unfollow them. And if they
Yeah.
are, as we were talking about before, having an ongoing negative effect on your mental health, you don't have
Mhm.
to feel guilty about letting some of those people go.
Right.
And I had to go on a selfless journey. I in all this church, it's be selfless at all times, be selfless. But actually, I am my best self when I can put myself first a little bit and care for my own mind and my own body. And then I have
Mhm.
such much more capacity to love deeper and love more fully the people that I choose to kind of let in.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really great point. And it is people, um, you don't have to continually maintain every relationship or acquaintance that has come to you in your life. It's a lot of work. That's a lot of resources going out. And it's easy to get depleted and not focus on just, your own health and well-being. And sometimes we just outgrow. Not everybody's a lifetime assignment. Not everybody is there to remain in your life, until you die. So you just outgrow people, and that's okay. It's all right.
Really, absolutely healthy.
Yeah. So tell me about the ways that struggling with mental illness made your life better.
Hmm. Yeah,
Because I think a lot of people struggling would be like, oh, yes, please share that. How, if I'm in the throes of it, what's the light at the end of the tunnel for me? How is this going to make my life better? How can it?
There's a fine line. You have to be at a place of self-reflection where you can accept that some of the harder things in your life have maybe improved, have
Mhm.
maybe made things a little bit better. And I mean, I've been battling depression now for almost 20 years, so it's been a while. So I've had some time to reflect, and I enjoy that process. But lately, I just have been thinking about, okay, this thing was pretty awful and has led to some really challenging things. But it has taught me to appreciate the good days. As I mentioned before, I mean, ever since my attempt, a couple times a year, I hear this little whisper of like, you made it for this, or you almost missed this. I mean, it just happened to me a couple months ago. I just had my niece and my nephew, they're 7 and 4, over at the pool at my condo, and we're swimming, and my mom and sister are laughing. And it was just an average Sunday. And it was just this moment where I said, you almost missed this, right? And it
Mhm.
truly has been this phrase that has kind of saved my life, because it keeps reminding me of the things that are most important. It certainly has taught me more empathy for anyone. I mean, if you have ever felt how horrible it is to not want to be alive, it definitely will deepen your understanding of just how
Mhm.
much some people struggle, and how how low that life can get.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So what are some signs that may not be very obvious or apparent to people that are, have been trying to work through it, through a depression, or a mental illness? What are some signs that you're healing?
Yeah, this is a tricky one because I did 3 rounds of therapy and I hated it. I hated talk therapy. I do not want to pay someone money to go and talk about the worst days of my life every week. I hated it, but it truly, truly helped in a lot of ways. But through that process, I mean, the first 2 times I kind of quit pretty quick, and then the third time finally I was like, okay, I'm committing to this for a year. And through that, I learned a couple of things first. And the reason I quit the first couple of times is things actually got worse before they got better. Partly, I had shoved things down for so long that I didn't want to deal with and didn't want to talk about. When you start going through some therapy, you kind of have to go there and those things have to come back up. And it's kind of like a bruise. It hurts when you rub it, right? It's like it hurts more, but then slowly it actually helps it
It's
heal.
healing. Yeah.
And that was part of the therapy for me. Another part of it, of an unobvious sign of healing, was that I started to feel things more deeply again. I mean, part of depression for me was kind of this numb. A lot of people report when they're in the throes of depression, they don't feel anything at all. And
Mm-hmm.
that's similar to me. And so when you started coming out of that, I kind of was going back to some of these highs and lows. And that actually was a good thing. It meant that my body was being more aware and open to the things around, and I wasn't in survival mode.
Yeah.
My circle also got a little smaller when I started respecting myself and learning about how I wanted people to treat me. I lost some people as I went through that healing journey, kind of as we were just talking about. So that also sometimes can be a sign. I didn't keep in touch with those people I had been partying with, because part of my growth was that wasn't who I wanted to be anymore. And that actually is a good sign of healing too.
Yeah. So basically, if you're on this healing journey and you're feeling like, oh my God, things are worse than ever, don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing or that you're going backwards. It may be the sign that you are in the throes of just you're digging all this stuff up that you didn't want to feel before, and you're expressing it so you can literally get rid of it. Because by not ever expressing with it, dealing with it, you can't really heal from it. And therefore you have to do things to remain kind of numb in order to keep it suppressed, right? So yeah, that's a really good point. You're going to have to just allow yourself to let it come up, to let it rise up, to express it, to get it out, because that's the best way to unload it so that you can heal and move forward. And that would be a scary thing for a lot of people, because the whole reason you've suppressed it in the first place is because you don't want to feel those, terribly uncomfortable feelings. So that would take some bravery and some courage to say, I'm willing to do this because I know it's going to get me to the other side of it. That would be
And
hard. Yeah.
it wasn't instant for me. Even after I got through that year of therapy and I quit, I was not in a great place. Even, healing is not linear. It's not a perfect, just every day gets better and then you're healed and you never experience it again. There's some more roller coaster type moments. And I've been suicidal since, but I have more tools now. And that's all you're doing in the end, is you're adding to that toolbox. A therapist can help you get through those worst moments and help you identify when you're slipping back, and truly just keep moving forward every day, trying one more thing, getting one more thing done, and just trying to be more alive each day.
Yeah. Well, I think your idea, just circle back around to this for a minute, because I think it's really so good, is you said, I'm going to commit to trying something, no matter how small, new or different, each day. Was it each day for a year?
I kept it up for over 5 months. And it can be little things too. It can be organizing a closet, all those things that we walk past every day and cause we beat ourselves up for. It can be very small or it can be very big. And truly, the most important part of it is taking that picture, because our brains lie to us. We don't have to believe everything we think. And I've done this experiment several times since, when I've started slipping, or you can do it with your business. If you feel stuck in your business, it's just a way to document the progress you are making, celebrate the wins that you are having, and just take some action so you don't feel stuck and sad about where you're at.
Yeah, that's so important. Taking some action, and it doesn't have to be a big thing. You're right, just cleaning out a closet or a drawer, but documenting it can be so important, because we have a tendency to forget progress that we make. I deal with that all the time with clients that I work with, and so I have a form that they fill out every session that talks about the challenges, the progress, all, what they did, what their action steps were, because then they're always surprised after, several months or 6 months or a year. I go, do you remember when? And I go back to the earlier ones and then compare that to where they are now. And they're just like blown away, because they forgot. They just, they're in the now, and they're here, and we just forget. It's easy to forget about all of where you began in your journey, and how all of those little tiny steps have added up to a complete 180 change in your life. So it's a wonderful way to measure results, and it's a wonderful I think the act of doing that helps a person build momentum, and it's really important to get momentum going. So just the one tiny thing, like you said, having coffee with a friend, or trying something, a yoga class or whatever it is, anything. Doing something productive around your house. We are meant, we're human beings. We're these wonderful spiritual beings having this amazing experience on the planet. But we're in essence, we're here to create, which means we're here to do things. And creating means you're doing, right? You're doing something. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if you're sitting there folding up, little squares of paper, making origami. You're creating, you're doing something, or you're cooking, or you're helping someone. It can be, the scale is endless. And so I think, doing nothing is only going to make you feel like you're spiraling in the wrong direction. So doing something, and then documenting it like you did, and committing to doing something for a period of time, is such a simple, and it's not a big ask of yourself. It's not overwhelming, but it's effective. I really, really love that. You're the first person that I've talked to that's mentioned that within the context of this particular topic. And I just think it's so simple, but I think it's really brilliant. So I love that. What, you have a going rogue story for me?
I absolutely do. I've got quite a bit. I mean, other than the skydiving and the going to Africa, but
Yeah.
the first thing that came to mind actually is very unexpected, and that was when I started to share the story of my suicide attempt. So I was still teaching. This was about 5-6 years ago now, when I was just starting Recklessly Alive, and we filmed a video. So we filmed a 3-minute video. Out in some cornfields and around Minneapolis, of the story of my attempt. And that was just the first. I didn't want to do it. Even as we're filming it, I kept screwing up my lines, and I did not want anyone to know about this story and the worst day of my life. But I just was like, I have to do something, and I guess we're going to do this. And so we put out the video. It got a really great reaction. It was like 300,000 views in a couple of weeks, and made a really big splash in my home community. Hundreds of people were sharing this video. And immediately I had a parent of one of my students call my boss, say that I was mentally unstable, that I shouldn't be in the classroom. It was highly suggested to me that I shut down all my social media and make it private, that I shouldn't be talking about this. And after that meeting, I was walking back to my classroom. I was feeling very defeated. Like that voice teacher voice was like, see, every time you try to do something, there's, why would you even try this? And then I just stopped. And I said, this man is the reason that I have to wake up tomorrow and keep fighting for this, because this man who can't even watch a story from 7 years ago of me attempting and now doing great, being known in my community as an incredible teacher, if he can't even accept me talking about that, imagine what that stigma does to his coworkers, to his kids, to his family. This man has to be the reason that I keep fighting. And I think we have made some great progress. I mean, 6 years ago when we started doing speaking events, we had events, they wouldn't let us pay to rent their space to have a suicide prevention event because they didn't want suicide on their anything. And we have come a long way in that, but we have a long way to go to fight this mindset that mental health isn't real, that it's not an illness in any means, and that it's okay to talk about, and it's okay to open up, and it's okay not to be okay, as cliche as that has become. We still have a lot of stigma to fight.
Yeah. Yeah, it is curious why there's such resistance around accepting that mental health is part of your overall health. I mean, it's odd with all of the information out there, and the science and everything, that it's very clear that the things that you are thinking about, the thoughts that you think, the thoughts you dwell on, the beliefs you have, create a physical reaction in your body. You're creating chemicals that are, part of whatever those thoughts are. And so depending on what you're thinking, especially what you are thinking on a regular basis, the negative self-talk and, agreeing or allowing the harmful, hurtful, terrible words of another person to take root in your psyche, those all create, chemicals in your body that then express physically. So it's odd that there are so many people that still are not connecting those dots or don't believe that those dots are connected. It's impossible for them to be separated. We just, as humans, we're chemical making machines. We have this biochemistry, and if you understand that, you really have such it's another great, very effective, and probably one of the most powerful tools to have in your tool bag, is to understand that what you are constantly thinking and dwelling on can either pull you out of something and shift you into a whole different mindset, which will obviously affect your state of being, your life, or it can take you, down the deep, dark passages that are very difficult to get out of. So I think, yeah, it needs to be talked about. And I think your mission is amazing. And, being willing to go around and share your story. Thank God for people like you, Sam, really.
Well, thank you. And when I started the work, when I read that no study has found that talking about suicide makes it any more likely that someone will attempt, but makes it much more likely they'll seek help, it was on. That was the moment where I was like, okay, talking about this is never going to make it worse. So we don't have to be afraid to talk about it. Everyone should be talking about it in your family, in your classrooms, in your churches. We just have to be more open and more talking about it. And I can lead that charge. It's scary and it's vulnerable, but I can lead that charge because it's not doing any harm. In fact, it can help a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, true, to put a period at the end of your going rogue story. So the value of going rogue for you was that you decided to, it would have been easy for you to go back into your shell. It would have been easy for you to not, right, not defend yourself, but rise up above that terrible criticism and just go for it anyway. So that was your rogue move. Do I understand that right?
Absolutely. And I think when you are going rogue in your life, no matter what that means to you, you're going to come up against some opposition. Every time I've tried to do something big and different, even healthy in my life, there have always been people coming against it. And that doesn't mean you're on the wrong track. In fact, that might mean you're on the right track.
Mm-hmm. Excellent point. Excellent point. And I think, again, to taking this so seriously, because I don't remember when I was even when my kids who are in their mid 30s, even when they were young, you did not hear about young people and children committing suicide. It's it's so insanely alarming right now that that is happening. It's heartbreaking, and so to not take this mental health seriously, we're doing such a great disservice to our young people who are the future. I just love that you're out there and you're doing it, and I'm sure you're going to have a huge impact on a lot of people's lives. I'm sure you already have. Sam, where can people find out more about you and your book and your sites and everything?
Absolutely. I'm Sam Eaton. Recklesslyalive.com is our website where you can find information about my story as well as my speaking. We do events all over the US. So if anybody listening is thinking, gosh, I want to help, but I don't know what to do, maybe this is part of my purpose. One of the easiest things you can do is just bring us in, bring me in to speak, get us connected to a school, a university, somewhere where we can host this event and help your community learn how to talk about this stuff. I am at Recklessly Alive on Instagram and TikTok, where I post every day about self-love, self-care, and mental health. Would love to connect with people there. The book, also called Recklessly Alive, we're all on brand. It's available on Amazon, and I'm really, really proud of it.
Good, you should be. And we will put those links in the show notes as well, so it's easy for people to find you. So that is going to be a wrap for today. Sam, thank you again for sharing so much invaluable information and your journey through what were obviously some very challenging years. I think, again, you've been a light for a lot of people who are struggling, and I commend you for making this your mission. So if you or somebody that you know is wrestling with suicidal thoughts, just know that it is possible to heal, to recognize your worth, and know that you are a very valuable member of the human race. There is a joyful life waiting for you. So make sure to check out Sam's book, Recklessly Alive, and his social media for daily inspiration. He's got some really great stuff on there. And if you want to find out what private coaching with me is all about, just head on over to loreebischoff.com. Please make sure to subscribe, share the show, and spread all of this good shift around. And if you find value in it, then just take a moment, give us a rating and a review. Those reviews really do help inspire other people to listen to all of the great shift being shared here. So until next week, stay feisty, my friends. Stay emotionally healthy by learning how to mind your mind and go make some epic shift happen in your lives. You too, Gary V.